Parents decide to adopt a dog for their little daughter, but 5 days later they find out it was fierce and their daughter was screaming desperately in the backyard. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching this video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Enjoy the story, everyone. The Arizona sun cast long shadows across the Miller family's backyard as Catherine watched her daughter Charlotte play alone with her dolls. The 5-year-old had arranged them in a meticulous circle, hosting what she called a friendship party. But Catherine couldn't help noticing the wistful expression on her daughter's face as she moved from doll to doll, changing voices for each imaginary friend. "She's doing it again," Catherine said, leaning against her husband Michael's shoulder as they observed from the kitchen window. Their modern home in the suburbs of Phoenix represented everything they had worked for over the past decade: stability, comfort, and the promise of a good life for their daughter. Michael wrapped an arm around his wife's waist. At 36, he had already established himself as one of the top architectural engineers in the Southwest. "She needs someone to play with," he agreed, his voice tinged with the familiar guilt that came with their demanding careers. "We can't always be there, especially with the Anderson project taking up so much of our time." The Anderson project, a massive residential development that promised to revolutionize sustainable living in the desert, had consumed both their lives for months. Catherine, as the lead environmental consultant, spent as many late nights at the office as Michael did. They had built successful careers, a beautiful home, but time, that was the one luxury they couldn't seem to afford for their daughter. "I keep thinking we should have another baby," Catherine said softly, not for the first time. "But with our schedules," Michael kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "We've talked about this. Even if we had another child now, Charlotte would still be alone most of the day until the baby was old enough to be a real playmate." Through the window, they watched as Charlotte abandoned her doll circle and wandered to the fence, peering through the slats at the neighbor's golden retriever who occasionally came to greet her. The longing in their daughter's stance was unmistakable. "Maybe we should ask her what she wants," Michael suggested, his architect's mind already planning, measuring, calculating possibilities. "She's old enough to tell us." That evening, after Charlotte's bath and her nightly routine of brushing her teeth while standing on her special step stool, Catherine sat on the edge of her daughter's bed. The room was a carefully curated space of comfort and imagination. Constellation lights twinkled across the ceiling, and bookshelves lined with colorful stories promised adventures beyond the confines of their daily lives. "Charlotte, sweetie," Catherine began, smoothing her daughter's damp blonde hair away from her forehead, "Daddy and I were wondering if there's something special you would like, something that would make you happy." Charlotte's blue eyes widened with consideration, her small face suddenly serious with the responsibility of the question. Catherine had expected requests for toys, perhaps a playhouse for the backyard, or even a swimming pool like her friend Emma had, but Charlotte surprised her as she often did. "I want a dog," she said without hesitation, as though the answer had been waiting just behind her lips for someone to ask the right question. "Her big dog that can run with me and sleep in my room and be my best friend forever and ever." Catherine's heart constricted. Of all the requests, this one seemed so simple, so achievable. She and Michael had both grown up with dogs. In fact, they had often talked about getting one, but life and careers and the responsibility of raising Charlotte had always pushed the idea to the background. "A dog is a big responsibility," Catherine said automatically, falling into the parental script. Charlotte nodded solemnly. "I know, I would help feed it and walk it and clean up its messes. I would share my toys and my cookies and everything." The earnestness in her daughter's voice disarmed Catherine completely. "Let me talk to Daddy about it, okay? But I think it's a wonderful idea." Charlotte's face lit up with such hope that Catherine felt momentarily dizzy with the power of parental influence, how the smallest agreements could create such joy, and how the necessary refusals could dim that same light. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Catherine relayed the conversation to Michael. "She wants a dog," she said, sliding under the covers beside him. "Not a toy, not a trip to Disneyland. Just a dog to be her friend." Michael smiled, setting aside his tablet where he had been reviewing plans for the project's community center. "Well, that's easy enough. We both love dogs. Remember Rusty from when I was growing up? Best friend I ever had until college. And my Sadie," Catherine added, nostalgia warming her voice. She slept at the foot of my bed every night from 3rd grade until I left for university. She paused, considering the implications. But with our schedules, is it fair to bring an animal into the house? Michael considered this, his expression thoughtful. We've been talking about pulling back a bit once the Anderson project is complete. And my parents are only 20 minutes away. They'd love to help out with a dog during our long days. Your mum would probably enjoy having a reason to come over more often, Catherine agreed, thinking of her mother-in-law's not-so-subtle hints about spending more time with Charlotte. So we're doing this? We're getting a dog? Michael asked, a boyish excitement spreading across his features that reminded Catherine of why she had fallen in love with him 12 years ago. I think we are, she nodded, feeling a sense of rightness settle over her. Charlotte needs a companion, and honestly, I've missed having a dog around. We should go to the shelter, Michael suggested, already reaching for his phone to check the local options. Give a home to a dog that needs one. I was thinking the same thing, Catherine agreed, watching as he scrolled through the websites of nearby animal shelters. Maybe an adult dog. Puppies are so fragile, and with Charlotte being so young, an adult dog would be perfect, Michael nodded, already trained, hopefully, and with a developed personality so we can find one that's good with kids. As they researched local shelters and scrolled through available dogs, Catherine felt a growing excitement. This wasn't just for Charlotte, though her happiness was their primary motivation. This was for all of them, a completion of their family they hadn't realized they were missing. Look at this one, Michael said, showing her a photo of a German Shepherd mix with soulful eyes. She looks so gentle. Or this one, Catherine pointed to a Labrador with a graying muzzle. Senior dogs have such wisdom. They scrolled through dozens of profiles, each one tugging at their hearts in different ways. By the time they finally turned off the lights, they had a short list of shelters to visit over the weekend, and dreams of paws padding across their hardwood floors. I hope Charlotte finds exactly what she's looking for, Catherine murmured, as she drifted towards sleep. We all will, Michael replied, squeezing her hand in the darkness. Neither of them could have imagined just how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how profoundly their lives were about to change with a single decision made from the purest of intentions to ease a child's loneliness and complete their family circle with the addition of 4 paws and a loyal heart. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect Phoenix day that made residents temporarily forget the brutal summer heat that would arrive in a few months. Charlotte woke with the sun, practically vibrating with excitement as she burst into her parents' bedroom. Is it time to get the dog? Is it time? Is it? She asked, bouncing on the edge of their bed with uncontained enthusiasm. Catherine groaned playfully, reaching out to tickle her daughter. Good morning to you too, sunshine. Yes, we're going to the shelter today, but they don't open until 10 o'clock. Michael checked his watch and sighed, which is still 3 hours away. Charlotte's face fell momentarily before brightening again. That's okay, I need to get ready anyway. I have to look nice to meet my new best friend. With that declaration, she raced back to her room, leaving her parents chuckling in her wake. I haven't seen her this excited since we took her to the Grand Canyon, Michael observed, stretching as he sat up. I just hope we find the right dog. She's got her heart set on this. Catherine nodded, already mentally preparing for the possibility that they might not find the perfect match today. We should manage her expectations a bit. Finding the right dog might take more than one visit. By the time they arrived at Desert Paws Rescue, Charlotte had changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on what she called her friend-making clothes, a yellow sundress with pockets and her favorite sneakers, the ones with stars that lit up when she walked. The shelter was larger than they expected, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the city with a sprawling yard divided into play areas. Inside, the air was cool, filled with the sounds of barking, meowing, and the chatter of other families also looking to adopt. A woman with kind eyes and graying hair approached them, her shelter volunteer t-shirt covered in a fine layer of pet hair. Welcome to Desert Paws, I'm Linda. Are you folks looking to adopt today? We are, Michael confirmed, resting his hand on Charlotte's shoulder. Our daughter would like a dog, preferably an adult dog that's good with children. Linda smiled down at Charlotte. Well, young lady, you're in luck. We have several wonderful dogs who would love nothing more than to go home with a nice family like yours. Would you like to meet some of them? Charlotte nodded enthusiastically, her eyes wide with anticipation. We're particularly looking for a calm, patient dog, Catherine added. Our schedules can be demanding at times, so we need a dog who can handle being alone for parts of the day without anxiety. I understand completely, Linda assured them. Let me show you some of our more independent adults who still love companionship. They followed Linda through the shelter, stopping to meet various dogs. There was Buddy, a gentle Labrador mix who immediately rolled over for belly rubs, Daisy, a border collie who showed off her impressive repertoire of tricks, and Max, a dignified older retriever who leaned against Charlotte's leg with affection. Each dog was lovely in its own way, but Catherine noticed that Charlotte's initial excitement was waning. Though she petted each animal and asked thoughtful questions, the spark of connection they had hoped for seemed absent. "Would you like to see more?" Linda asked, noting Charlotte's polite but subdued responses. "Yes, please," Charlotte answered, glancing hopefully toward the kennels they hadn't yet visited. Linda led them to a separate section of the facility. "These are some of our more challenging adoptions," she explained. "Dogs that have been here longer or have specific needs. They're all wonderful animals, but they sometimes need families willing to put in extra effort." As they walked past the kennels, most of the dogs rushed forward, barking or wagging their tails in greeting. But one dog remained at the back of his enclosure, watching them with alert, intelligent eyes. Charlotte stopped abruptly. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the muscular black and tan Doberman sitting with remarkable stillness. Linda's expression softened. "That's Khan. He's been with us for almost 8 months now." "Can I meet him?" Charlotte asked, already moving toward the kennel. Catherine exchanged a concerned glance with Michael. A Doberman wasn't what they had envisioned. The breed had a reputation, whether deserved or not, and Khan's imposing presence was undeniable. "He's very selective about who he bonds with," Linda explained, her tone careful. "He's been adopted and returned 3 times already, for different reasons each time." "What reasons?" Michael asked, moving protectively closer to Charlotte, who was now kneeling by the kennel door, watching Khan with fascination. Linda sighed. "The first family said he was too aloof, wouldn't engage with them. The second claimed he was too protective, growled at visitors. The third just said he wasn't a good fit, but we suspected they were simply unprepared for a dog of his intelligence and energy level." While the adults talked, Charlotte had begun a quiet, one-sided conversation with Khan. "Hello," she whispered. "My name is Charlotte. I'm 5½. I've been waiting for a best friend for a very long time. Have you been waiting too?" To the astonishment of everyone watching, Khan rose from his position and approached the kennel door. He moved with fluid grace, his muscular body radiating power and control. When he reached Charlotte, he lowered his head to her eye level and regarded her steadily. "He likes me," Charlotte declared with absolute certainty. "Would you like to meet him properly?" Linda asked, looking to Catherine and Michael for permission. "In the interaction room where you can get acquainted safely." Catherine hesitated. This wasn't the gentle family pet she had imagined bringing home. Khan exuded strength and intensity, his cropped ears and docked tail adding to his formidable appearance. But the way he looked at Charlotte, there was something in those eyes that gave her pause. "I'm not sure this is the right match," she began cautiously. "Please, Mommy," Charlotte pleaded. "He's sad. Can't you see he needs us?" Michael squeezed Catherine's hand. "Let's at least meet him properly before we decide." The interaction room was a quiet space with comfortable seating and toys scattered about. Linda brought Khan in on a leash, and the dog immediately surveyed the room with military precision before sitting at attention, waiting. "He's very well trained," Linda explained. "We believe he may have had some professional training before he was abandoned, though we don't know his full history." "Can I pet him?" Charlotte asked, her voice hushed with reverence. "Let's have him come to you," Linda suggested. "Khan, say hello." At the command, Khan approached Charlotte with deliberate care, each movement measured as if he understood the need to be gentle. He stopped just before her, his dark eyes solemn. Charlotte slowly extended her hand, palm up as she'd been taught. "Hello, Khan, it's nice to meet you." Khan sniffed her hand delicately. Then, in a gesture that made Catherine's breath catch, he lowered his head and pressed it lightly against Charlotte's palm. "He's chosen you," Linda said softly, genuine surprise in her voice. "I've never seen him warm up to someone so quickly." Over the next half hour, they watched as Khan transformed from the stoic sentinel they'd first seen to an attentive companion. He remained dignified, but there was a softening around his eyes when Charlotte spoke to him. a subtle relaxation of his powerful frame as she stroked his glossy coat. When Charlotte discovered a tennis ball among the toys and tossed it experimentally, Khan retrieved it with effortless precision and placed it gently back in her hands, causing her to dissolve into delighted giggles. "What's his story?" Michael asked Linda quietly, as they watched the developing bond between child and dog. "Before the shelter, I mean." Linda shook her head. "We don't know much. He was found wandering near South Mountain, severely dehydrated, and with some old injuries that had healed poorly. No microchip, no collar. The vet estimated he was about 3 years old then, so he's 4 now. Despite whatever hardships he faced, he's never shown aggression toward our staff or other dogs. He's just reserved, watchful. Like he's always on guard," Catherine observed. "Exactly," Linda nodded. "But look at him now." Khan had settled beside Charlotte, his head resting lightly against her leg, as she read to him from an imaginary book she'd created from a shelter pamphlet. His eyes remained alert, but there was something new there, a contentment that transformed his entire demeanor. "I think he's the one, isn't he?" Michael said quietly to Catherine. Catherine struggled with the decision. Khan wasn't the easy, friendly family dog she'd envisioned. He was intense, powerful, and came with an unknown past. Yet watching him with Charlotte, seeing the careful way he positioned himself beside her, the attentive tilt of his head as she chattered away, there was something undeniably right about it. He would certainly be a deterrent to anyone thinking about breaking into the house, she quipped weakly, still trying to process her mixed feelings. "He's more than that," Michael said. "Look at them, Kath. I think Charlotte was right. They need each other." Linda approached with a folder. "I have all his medical records here. He's been fully vetted, neutered, and is up to date on vaccinations. He's house-trained and knows basic commands. If you're interested, we would require a home check and a 2-week trial period before finalizing the adoption." "What do you think, sweetheart?" Catherine asked Charlotte. "Is Khan the dog you want to bring home?" Charlotte looked up, her face radiant with certainty. "He's not just a dog, Mommy. He's my dog. He's been waiting for me, and I've been waiting for him." With those words, the decision was made. Catherine felt a curious mix of trepidation and rightness as she reached for the paperwork. As she signed her name, Khan watched her with those intelligent eyes, and she could have sworn there was gratitude in his gaze, a solemn promise passed between them without words. None of them could have predicted then just how profound that promise would prove to be, or how their lives would be irrevocably changed by the addition of this dignified dog with the watchful eyes and loyal heart. As they prepared to take Khan home, the shelter staff gathered to say goodbye to the dog many had thought might never find his forever family, and in the midst of the farewells and well-wishes, Khan remained steadfast beside Charlotte, as if he had always belonged there and always would. The drive home from Desert Paws Rescue was filled with Charlotte's excited chatter as she made promises to Khan about all the adventures they would have together. The Doberman sat with perfect posture in the back seat, his leash securely fastened to the special dog harness Michael had installed that morning, just in case they found the right companion. "You'll have your own special bed in my room, and we can read stories every night, and I'll teach you all my secrets," Charlotte told Khan earnestly. The dog's ears swiveled toward her voice, his attentive gaze never leaving her face. Catherine watched in the rearview mirror, still processing the unexpected turn their shelter visit had taken. A Doberman. They had gone looking for a gentle family pet and were bringing home a dog that made most people cross to the other side of the street. Yet there was something about Khan's dignified demeanor, the careful way he positioned himself next to Charlotte, that calmed her misgivings. "We should stop at Pet World on the way home," Michael suggested. "Get everything he needs, bed, food, toys, the works." The pet store visit turned into an impromptu celebration. Charlotte solemnly selected each item, consulting with Khan as if seeking his approval on every choice. The Doberman remained poised and alert, drawing stares from other shoppers, but behaving with impeccable manners, staying close to Charlotte's side without pulling on the leash Michael held. "Excuse me, sir," a store employee approached hesitantly. "Store policy requires muzzles for certain breeds, including Dobermans." Before Michael could respond, an elderly gentleman browsing nearby interjected, "That's ridiculous. Look at that dog. Best behaved animal in the store. My granddaughter's teacup poodle makes more trouble than that fine specimen." The employee wavered, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just policy." It's our first day with him, Catherine explained smoothly. We've just adopted him from Desert Paws and we're getting his supplies. I promise he'll be perfectly behaved. Something in her confident tone, or perhaps Khan's regal bearing, convinced the employee to relent. All right, but please keep him close. As they checked out, Catherine couldn't help but notice the cashier's nervous glances at Khan. It was a reaction they would soon become all too familiar with. At home, Khan explored his new surroundings with methodical precision, moving room to room with Charlotte as his eager guide. He checked windows, doorways, and corners with a thoroughness that impressed Michael. It's like having our own security system, he commented as Khan circled back to the living room, seemingly satisfied with his inspection. He's making sure it's safe, Charlotte declared with absolute conviction. That's his job now. That evening, as Catherine prepared dinner, she received the first of many concerned calls. Her mother's voice crackled through the speaker with undisguised alarm. A Doberman? With Charlotte? Catherine, what were you thinking? Catherine sighed, watching through the kitchen window as Charlotte tossed a ball for Khan in the backyard. The dog caught it with graceful precision, returning it gently to her waiting hands. Mom, he's wonderful with her. You should see them together. I've read about these dogs. They can turn without warning. One minute they're fine, the next... That's not true, Catherine interrupted, surprising herself with her defensiveness. Dobermans are intelligent working dogs. They're loyal and protective. Exactly, protective. What happens when he decides someone is a threat to Charlotte? What if he decides one of her little friends is a threat? The conversation continued in circles, her mother's concerns echoing the apprehension Catherine herself had felt at the shelter. Yet watching Khan's gentle interactions with Charlotte, she found her resolve strengthening. Just meet him before you judge him, she finally said. Come for dinner tomorrow, see for yourself. The next morning brought a new challenge. As Catherine prepared to take Charlotte to her weekend swimming lesson, their neighbor Diane stopped by, her expression tense. I saw you brought home a Doberman yesterday, she said without preamble. Several families on the street are concerned, especially those with small children. Catherine felt a flash of irritation. Khan is perfectly gentle. He's wonderful with Charlotte. They're unpredictable, Diane insisted. My cousin was attacked by one when she was a child. Did you know they were bred as attack dogs? They were bred as protection dogs, Catherine corrected, remembering the research she'd done late into the previous night. And every dog is an individual. Khan has given us no reason to worry. Well, the neighborhood association may have something to say about this. There are restrictions on dangerous breeds in our covenants. Catherine's professional demeanor, the one that had served her well in countless environmental impact meetings, slipped firmly into place. I've reviewed the HOA bylaws thoroughly. They require that dogs be properly contained and controlled, which Khan will be. There is no breed restriction. She closed the door on Diane's protests, only to find Michael watching with a concerned expression. That's the third call I've had this morning, he said. Even my mother is worried and she loves all dogs. Catherine felt a flicker of doubt. Do you think we made a mistake? From the hallway came Charlotte's laugh, bright and uninhibited, followed by the soft padding of paws. Khan appeared carrying Charlotte's swimming bag in his mouth, the little girl skipping beside him. Khan is helping me get ready, she announced. He knows we have to hurry for swimming. Michael's expression softened. No, he said quietly to Catherine. I don't think we made a mistake at all. The swimming lesson proved to be another battleground. As they walked Khan around the outdoor community pool facility, waiting for Charlotte's class to finish, parents gathered in small clusters, casting wary glances their way. Is that a Doberman? One father asked, positioning himself between Khan and his son. Yes, this is Khan, Michael replied pleasantly. We just adopted him yesterday. You're walking him around children, the man's voice rose. These dogs are on the dangerous breeds list for a reason. Catherine felt Khan shift closer to her side, not in aggression but seeming to sense her discomfort. She rested her hand on his sleek head, drawing confidence from his steady presence. Khan has shown nothing but gentleness, she said firmly, especially with children. Until he doesn't, another parent muttered, loud enough to be heard. By the time Charlotte emerged from her lesson, the atmosphere around the pool had grown so tense that Catherine suggested they leave immediately rather than staying for Charlotte to play as they usually did. But why? Charlotte asked, her face falling with disappointment. "I want to show Khan how good I can swim." "We'll come back another time, sweetie," Michael promised, guiding them toward the exit as murmurs followed in their wake. The weekend continued in much the same vein. Friends who had planned to visit suddenly had other commitments. Catherine's sister called to say she wouldn't be bringing her children over for their usual Sunday dinner until that dog proves itself. "How is he supposed to prove himself if no one will give him a chance?" Catherine asked in frustration after ending the call. "He'll win them over," Michael assured her, watching as Khan lay patiently while Charlotte carefully brushed his shiny coat. "Just like he won us over." By Monday morning, Catherine felt emotionally drained from defending their decision. As she prepared to leave for work, arranging for her father-in-law to check on Khan midday, she found herself offering the dog an apologetic pat. "Sorry about all this," she murmured. "It's not fair to judge you without knowing you." Khan regarded her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand more than any animal should. Then he gently pressed his muzzle against her hand, in a gesture that felt remarkably like forgiveness. At work, Catherine found little respite. News of their adoption had spread, and colleagues stopped by her office with thinly veiled concerns disguised as curiosity. "A Doberman with your little girl? Brave choice," her assistant commented. "My brother-in-law had one. Had to get rid of it after it snapped at his son." "Khan isn't like that," Catherine replied, the defense becoming automatic. By Wednesday, the pressure had mounted to the point where Michael suggested they discuss their options. "We still have a week left in our trial period," he reminded her as they sat on the patio after Charlotte had gone to bed. "If we're having doubts." "Are you having doubts?" Catherine asked, watching Khan patrol the perimeter of their yard, his movements fluid and purposeful in the gathering dusk. Michael was quiet for a moment. "I'm concerned about the stress this is putting on all of us. The constant judgment, the explanations. Even Charlotte noticed that Emma's mother wouldn't let her come over for a play date." Catherine nodded, the day's accumulation of slights and worries heavy on her shoulders. "I know, but then I see them together." She gestured to where Khan had completed his rounds and was now settling on the porch steps, facing outward, ever vigilant. "He's already part of the family," Michael acknowledged. "He is," Catherine agreed. "But is it fair to him if the whole world is against him? What kind of life is that?" They sat in contemplative silence, the weight of the decision pressing down. Khan had integrated seamlessly into their home life over the past 4 days. He responded to commands with eager intelligence, showed unfailing gentleness with Charlotte, and had even begun to reveal glimpses of personality, a playful side that emerged when Charlotte convinced him to chase soap bubbles, a contented sigh when Michael scratched behind his ears just right. Yet the outside world seemed determined to see only threat in his muscular frame and alert posture. "Let's give it the full 2 weeks," Michael finally suggested. "By then people will have seen how he really is, and if things don't improve..." He left the sentence unfinished, neither of them willing to voice what "if" might mean. Catherine nodded, reaching for his hand. 2 weeks, and we'll make sure everyone sees the real Khan." Later that night, checking on Charlotte before bed, Catherine found her daughter sound asleep, with Khan lying protectively beside the bed, his head raised at Catherine's entrance. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're exactly where you need to be." Khan's tail thumped once against the carpet in acknowledgement, his eyes reflecting the dim night light with a solemn promise that Catherine was beginning to understand. This dog wasn't just a pet, he was a guardian who had chosen their family as worthy of his protection. Little did she know just how profound that protection would prove to be, or how soon Khan would have the opportunity to demonstrate the true depths of his devotion. As Catherine closed Charlotte's door, leaving dog and child in peaceful slumber, the events that would forever cement Khan's place in their family were less than 24 hours away. Thursday dawned with the promise of scorching heat, typical for late spring in Phoenix. Catherine woke early, the weight of the ongoing tension about Khan heavy on her mind. The past 4 days had been an emotional roller coaster. Joy at watching the beautiful bond developing between Charlotte and Khan, frustration at the constant judgment from neighbors and friends, and lingering worry that perhaps the concerns weren't entirely unfounded. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Michael, and padded down the hallway to check on Charlotte. Peering into the room, she found her daughter sprawled across her bed in the abandonment of childhood sleep, one arm flung wide, the other curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit. Khan lay in his designated spot beside the bed, but his eyes were open, alert even in the pre-dawn light. He acknowledged Catherine with a slight tilt of his head, but didn't move from his post. "Good boy," she whispered, and was rewarded with a single soft thump of his tail against the carpet. Downstairs, Catherine started the coffee maker and opened her laptop, determined to get some work done before the household stirred to life. The Anderson project was entering a critical phase, with environmental impact assessments due by the end of the month. She lost herself in reports and calculations until the sound of Khan's nails clicking on the hardwood floor announced his arrival. "Morning," she greeted him, watching as he performed his now familiar routine of checking each window and door on the ground floor before settling near her feet with a soft sigh. "You're really something, aren't you?" she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. If only everyone could see what we see. By the time Charlotte bounced downstairs, followed by a yawning Michael, Catherine had prepared breakfast and finished a work email. It was a normal family morning, or would have been, if not for the tension that had seeped into their lives since bringing Khan home. "Can Khan come to my school today for show and tell?" Charlotte asked, spooning cereal into her mouth. "Miss Wilson said we could bring our pets." Catherine exchanged a glance with Michael. "I don't think that's a good idea, sweetheart," she said gently. "Khan is still settling in, and school might be too overwhelming for him." Charlotte's face fell. "But he's the best thing that ever happened to me. I want everyone to meet him." "How about we take some pictures instead?" Michael suggested. "You can show those and tell everyone all about him." The compromise was accepted with reluctance, and soon the morning routine shifted into high gear. Lunches packed, teeth brushed, hair combed, last-minute permission slips signed. Through it all, Khan remained a calm presence, watching over Charlotte as if memorizing her every movement. "Your dad will check on Khan at lunchtime," Catherine reminded Charlotte as they prepared to leave. "And Mrs. Rivera next door has our number if anything happens before then." Mrs. Rivera, one of the few neighbors who hadn't expressed concern about Khan, had agreed to listen for any issues while working from home. At 72, with a lifetime of experience with working dogs on her family's ranch in New Mexico, she had been refreshingly matter-of-fact about the Doberman. "That dog's got good eyes," she had declared after meeting Khan the previous evening. "Smart and steady. You got yourselves a fine guardian there." Her words had been a balm after days of criticism, reinforcing Catherine's growing conviction that they had made the right choice, despite the social complications. After dropping Charlotte at school, Catherine and Michael both headed to their respective offices, the day unfolding with the predictable rhythm of meetings, phone calls, and deadlines. By mid-afternoon, Catherine was deep in consultation with her team when her phone vibrated with a text from Michael. "Dad says Khan was perfect when he took him out at lunch. Wants to know if he can take him for a run tomorrow." Catherine smiled, typing a quick affirmative response. Michael's father, a retired veterinarian, had been another unexpected ally. His professional assessment of Khan had been glowing. Exceptional temperament. Someone trained him well before he ended up at that shelter. The workday ended earlier than usual for both of them, a rarity that Catherine attributed to their mutual desire to get home to Charlotte and Khan. They arrived within minutes of each other, pulling into their driveway just as Mrs. Rivera returned from picking up Charlotte from her after-school program. "Your dog was quiet as a mouse all day," the elderly woman reported. "Just heard him do one patrol around noon, then again around 3. Rest of the time, I wouldn't have known he was there." Charlotte bounded from Mrs. Rivera's car, racing to greet her parents. "Can Khan come outside now? I want to play with him in the yard." After thanking their neighbor, the family retreated to their backyard, a spacious area enclosed by a 6-foot privacy fence. Michael unhooked Khan's leash, and the Doberman immediately began a thorough inspection of the perimeter, while Charlotte collected her outdoor toys. "I was thinking," Michael said as they watched Khan complete his rounds, "maybe we should have a small gathering this weekend. Just a few friends so they can see how good Khan is with us. Maybe change some minds." Catherine considered the idea. "That might work. We could invite your parents, my sister, maybe the Thompsons from down the street. Their sons are about Charlotte's age. And your boss and his wife," Michael added. "Didn't you say James has always had dogs?" They continued planning as Charlotte initiated a game of fetch with Khan, the Doberman demonstrating remarkable restraint as he caught the ball mid-air but returned it to her with gentle delicacy. Look at him, Catherine marveled. He could easily overpower her, but he's so careful. Michael nodded, his expression softening. He knows she's precious cargo. As the evening progressed, the temperature remained pleasantly warm, prompting Michael to suggest dinner on the patio. I'll grill some chicken. It's too nice to be inside. While Michael manned the grill and Catherine prepared a salad, Charlotte continued playing with Khan, her laughter carrying across the yard as she attempted to teach him to roll over, a command he seemed reluctant to perform, preferring to maintain his dignified sitting position. Khan doesn't want to be silly, Mummy, Charlotte reported, joining Catherine at the patio table. He says he's a serious dog with important jobs to do. Catherine smiled at her daughter's imagination. And what jobs are those? Protecting us, Charlotte said with absolute certainty. That's why he's always watching, he told me so. Though she knew it was just a child's fantasy, Catherine felt a shiver of something like recognition. Khan did seem to take his self-appointed guardian role seriously, maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings in a way that was both reassuring and slightly unnerving in its intensity. After dinner, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they remained outside in the gathering dusk. Catherine and Michael relaxed at the patio table with glasses of wine, while Charlotte built an elaborate fort from cushions at the far end of the yard. Khan lay nearby, seemingly at ease but with his attention fixed on the child as she played. I'm going to get the dessert, Catherine announced, gathering their plates. There's that chocolate cake left from Tuesday. Michael rose to help, and they went inside together, leaving the patio door ajar to hear Charlotte. The kitchen was only steps away, with a clear view of the yard through the large windows. Catherine was slicing the cake when she heard it, a low, rumbling growl that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She whirled toward the window in time to see Khan rise from his relaxed position, his entire body suddenly rigid with tension. The growl deepened, becoming something primal and terrifying. "Michael!" she gasped, her heart lurching into her throat. They both rushed to the window. Khan was advancing toward Charlotte, who had abandoned her fort and was crouched near the far corner of the yard, examining something on the ground. The Doberman's posture had transformed. Gone was the dignified companion, replaced by a creature of coiled muscle and focused aggression. "Charlotte!" Michael shouted, already moving toward the door. Before either of them could reach the yard, Khan lunged forward with explosive speed. Catherine screamed as the Doberman seized Charlotte by the back of her shirt and literally threw her several feet across the lawn, away from whatever had captured her attention. Michael reached the yard first, with Catherine only steps behind, both of them racing toward their daughter, who had landed in a crumpled heap on the grass. But Khan wasn't finished. The dog positioned himself between Charlotte and the corner of the yard, his hackles raised, teeth bared in a snarl that seemed to vibrate the very air. As they reached Charlotte, who was starting to sit up with a dazed expression, Catherine finally saw what had triggered Khan's reaction. Coiled in the corner where Charlotte had been exploring, its distinctive diamond-patterned body tense and ready to strike, was a large rattlesnake. "Oh my God," Catherine breathed, gathering Charlotte into her arms and backing away quickly. The rattlesnake, cornered and threatened, launched itself at Khan. With lightning reflexes, the Doberman dodged the strike and countered with one of his own, powerful jaws snapping closed on the snake's body just behind the head. With a savage shake, Khan disabled the venomous threat, then dropped it and backed away, still growling. Michael scooped up Charlotte, carrying her swiftly toward the house. "Are you hurt? Did it bite you?" "Khan pushed me," Charlotte said, her voice small with shock. "He pushed me really hard." "He saved you, baby," Catherine explained, her voice shaking as the reality of what had just happened washed over her. "There was a rattlesnake. Khan protected you." Inside, they examined Charlotte carefully, finding only minor scrapes on her knees and palms from her rough landing on the lawn. Khan had followed them in and now stood at attention, his eyes still alert but his demeanor calmer. "Come here, boy," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Khan approached cautiously, seeming uncertain of his reception after the violent display. Michael knelt beside him, running his hands over the dog's body to check for injuries. "He's been bitten," he announced grimly, indicating a puncture wound on Khan's front leg that was already beginning to swell. "We need to get him to the emergency vet immediately." Catherine's mind raced. Rattlesnake venom could be rapidly fatal to dogs. "I'll call ahead," she said, already reaching for her phone. "Charlotte," "Put your shoes on. We're taking Khan to the animal hospital." As they loaded Khan into the car, the Doberman remained stoic despite the obvious pain of his injury. Charlotte insisted on sitting beside him in the back seat, her small hand resting on his shoulder. "You saved me," she whispered to him. "You're the bravest dog in the whole world." The emergency veterinary hospital was a 20-minute drive that Catherine and Michael made in 12, hazard lights flashing. By the time they arrived, Khan's leg had swollen considerably, and he was beginning to pant heavily, a sign the venom was spreading through his system. The staff rushed him into treatment immediately, administering anti-venom while the family waited in an antiseptic smelling room, Charlotte between them on a hard plastic chair. "Is Khan going to be okay?" she asked in a small voice that broke Catherine's heart. "The doctors are helping him," Michael assured her, though his eyes when they met Catherine's over their daughter's head were filled with worry. An hour passed, then 2. Charlotte eventually fell asleep against her father's shoulder, exhausted by the evening's events. When the veterinarian finally appeared, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "He's responding well to treatment," Dr. Patel told them. "You got him here quickly, which made all the difference. The bite was on his leg, not his face or neck, which is fortunate. And Dobermans are strong dogs. He's fighting hard." Will he make it?" Catherine asked, voicing the fear that had been growing with each passing minute. The vet nodded. "I believe so. We'll keep him overnight for observation, but he's already showing signs of improvement. He's a remarkable animal." "He saved our daughter from that snake," Michael explained, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "If he hadn't been there, if he hadn't reacted so quickly..." Dr. Patel's expression softened with understanding. "Then you're very fortunate to have him. Not many dogs would recognize the danger a snake poses, let alone act so decisively to protect a family member." Catherine thought of all the criticism they had faced over bringing Khan into their home, all the warnings about Dobermans being dangerous, unpredictable. The irony was almost overwhelming. The very traits that had caused so much concern, his vigilance and protective instincts, had saved Charlotte's life tonight. As they prepared to leave, with promises to return first thing in the morning, Dr. Patel allowed them a brief visit with Khan. The Doberman was sedated, but lifted his head when they entered, his eyes finding Charlotte immediately. "Thank you," Catherine whispered as she stroked his sleek head. "Thank you for protecting our little girl." Charlotte leaned close, pressing a gentle kiss between Khan's ears. "I knew you were special," she told him solemnly. "I knew you were my dog." In that moment, watching her daughter with the dog who had risked his life for her without hesitation, Catherine realized that Khan had never been just a pet they were giving a home to. He was, and had always been, a guardian who had chosen them, chosen Charlotte as worthy of his ultimate devotion. News of Khan's heroic act spread through the neighborhood with astonishing speed. By the time the Millers returned home from the emergency veterinary hospital, exhausted and emotionally drained, but relieved by Khan's positive prognosis, Mrs. Rivera was waiting on their porch with a pot of coffee and a determination to hear the full story. "I saw all the commotion," she explained as she poured steaming mugs for Catherine and Michael while Charlotte finally slept upstairs. "Then Diane called me saying you'd rushed off with the dog and the child. Whole street's been talking." Catherine sighed, cradling the warm mug between her palms. "Khan saved Charlotte from a rattlesnake in our backyard. He got bitten protecting her." Mrs. Rivera's weathered face creased with concern. "Is he going to make it?" "The vet thinks so," Michael confirmed. "We're picking him up tomorrow if he continues to improve overnight." The elderly woman nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "I told you that dog had good eyes. My father always said you can't train that kind of protection. It's born in the bone." She patted Catherine's hand. "You sleep now. I'll be by in the morning with some breakfast for you all." True to her word, Mrs. Rivera arrived at 7 the next morning, bearing a casserole and the news that she had already spoken to at least 5 neighbors about Khan's heroism. "They're all saying how wrong they were," she reported with undisguised satisfaction. "Even Diane is telling everyone how the dog saved little Charlotte's life." By mid-morning, after Charlotte had been settled with Michael's mother for the day, Catherine and Michael returned to the veterinary hospital to find Khan much improved. The swelling in his leg had reduced significantly, and though he moved with careful deliberation, his eyes were clear and alert. "He's been a model patient," Dr. Patel told them as he completed a final examination. Some dogs become aggressive when in pain, but he's remained calm and cooperative throughout treatment. "Can we take him home?" Catherine asked, watching as Khan leaned gently against Michael's leg, seeking contact. "Yes, but he'll need to rest for several days," the vet cautioned, handing them a prescription for pain medication and antibiotics. "The bite wound should be kept clean, and he shouldn't put too much weight on that leg. I'd like to see him again in 3 days to check his progress." The drive home was quiet, Khan lying in the back seat with dignified patience despite his obvious discomfort. Catherine found herself continually glancing back at him, still processing the events of the previous evening. How close they had come to tragedy, how decisively Khan had acted. "I can't stop thinking about it," she admitted to Michael. "If he hadn't been there, if he hadn't recognized the danger—" Michael reached across the console to squeeze her hand. "But he was, and he did. And Charlotte is safe because of him." At home, they were surprised to find several neighbors gathered on their front lawn, bearing gifts and cards. As Michael helped Khan from the car, a spontaneous round of applause broke out. "Here's the hero," called Mr. Thompson, the neighbor who had been so concerned about having a Doberman on the street. "We wanted to welcome him home properly." Catherine blinked back unexpected tears as neighbors who had pointedly avoided them days earlier now crowded forward, offering dog treats, get-well toys, and heartfelt apologies. "We were wrong about him," Diane admitted, watching as Khan acknowledged the attention with reserved dignity. "I'm so sorry for the things I said." Khan's recovery became a community affair. Neighbors volunteered to check on him during the day when the Millers returned to work. Children left drawings of Khan the Brave in their mailbox. The local pet store sent a gift basket with premium dog food and an orthopedic bed. But it was the call from the Arizona Republic that truly elevated Khan's story beyond their neighborhood. A reporter had heard about the incident from a staff member at the veterinary hospital and requested an interview and photos. "Dog stories are always popular," the journalist explained when she arrived at their home 3 days after the incident. "But this one is special. A shelter dog with a troubled past saving the child who finally gave him a permanent home. That's front-page material." The article appeared on Sunday, complete with photographs of Charlotte and Khan side by side, the little girl beaming while the Doberman sat protectively beside her, his intelligent eyes seeming to communicate more than any caption could express. "Wonder Dog, rescued Doberman saves child from rattlesnake," the headline proclaimed. By Monday, the story had been picked up by national news outlets. By Tuesday, Khan had a social media following. By Wednesday, the Millers were fielding calls from television producers. "It's surreal," Catherine told Michael as they scrolled through yet another flood of messages and comments praising their dog. "A week ago, people crossed the street to avoid him. Now he's a celebrity." Michael laughed, watching as Charlotte carefully arranged Khan's growing collection of fan mail and gifts. "I told you he'd win them over. I just didn't expect it to happen quite like this," the director of Desert Paws Rescue called, her voice thick with emotion. "Khan's story has done more for Doberman rescue than years of our advocacy work," she explained. "We've had dozens of inquiries about adoption, specifically asking for dogs like Khan. People are giving these wonderful animals a second look now." The shelter requested permission to share Khan's story on their website and social media channels, along with his adoption journey. "People need to understand that many wonderful dogs are overlooked because of breed stereotypes or past histories," Linda explained. Khan is helping change those perceptions. As Khan recovered, gaining strength each day, the family adjusted to their new status as owners of a canine celebrity. Charlotte proudly wore a t-shirt with Khan's image to school, where she was invited to give a special presentation about her heroic dog. Michael found himself fielding questions about Khan from colleagues who had previously expressed concerns. Catherine's mother, who had been among the most vocal critics, now bragged about her granddog to her bridge club. "It's like whiplash," Catherine remarked to Michael as they watched Khan and Charlotte playing a gentle game of tug-of-war in the living room, the Doberman carefully modulating his strength to match the child's. From pariah to hero in one dramatic moment. "People respond to stories," Michael observed. "And Khan's is one for the ages, the abandoned dog who found his purpose protecting the family who gave him a chance." 10 days after the incident, when Khan's leg had healed enough for longer walks, they took him to a local park. They had barely made it past the entrance when the first recognition occurred, a woman pointing excitedly, then approaching with her phone raised. "Is that Khan, the wonder dog?" she asked, already snapping photos. "My kids have been following his story. Could I get a picture with him?" It was the first of many such encounters. Khan handled the attention with characteristic dignity, tolerating the fuss with stoic patience, though Catherine noticed how he relaxed visibly once they returned to the quiet of their home. "He's not in it for the fame," she told Charlotte as they watched Khan settle into his favorite spot in the living room, positioning himself where he could see both the front door and the backyard through the windows. "He's just being himself. He's the best dog in the whole world," Charlotte declared, crawling over to rest her head against Khan's side. The Doberman shifted slightly to accommodate her, one paw gently draped over her leg in a protective gesture that had become familiar. The media attention gradually faded, but Khan's elevated status in the community remained. Neighbors who had once petitioned against dangerous breeds now pointed to him as the exception that disproved the rule. The Homeowners Association, which had been considering breed restrictions, unanimously voted against such measures, citing Khan as evidence that individual temperament, not breed, should be the determining factor. For the Millers, the most profound change wasn't the public recognition, but the deeper connection that had formed within their family. Khan had transitioned from a pet they were still getting to know to an integral member of their household, a guardian whose devotion had been proven in the most dramatic way possible. One evening, about 3 weeks after the rattlesnake incident, Catherine found Michael sitting on the back patio, watching as Charlotte and Khan explored the yard together. The area where the snake had been found had been thoroughly checked and secured, with additional preventative measures installed around the property's perimeter. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling into the chair beside him. Michael smiled, his eyes never leaving the pair at the far end of the yard. "I was just thinking about that day at the shelter, how we almost passed him by because he wasn't what we expected." Catherine nodded, remembering her own hesitation. "And now we can't imagine our lives without him." "It makes you wonder, doesn't it?" Michael mused. "How many other Khans are out there just waiting for someone to see past the surface?" As if sensing he was the subject of their conversation, Khan looked up from where he had been inspecting a fascinating scent with Charlotte. His eyes met Catherine's across the yard, and she felt again that curious connection, an understanding that transcended species, a recognition of the bond they now shared. "You know," she said slowly, "Linda mentioned that Desert Paws is overwhelmed with applicants now, people wanting dogs like Khan. Maybe we could help somehow. Sponsor some adoptions or volunteer?" Michael's face lit up with interest. "That's a great idea. Khan's already changed perception for so many people. Imagine if we could build on that, help more dogs find homes." As they discussed possibilities, Charlotte and Khan rejoined them on the patio. The little girl's cheeks were flushed with excitement, her eyes bright. "Khan found a special rock," she announced, opening her palm to reveal an ordinary pebble. "He says it's magic and will keep snakes away forever and ever." Catherine smiled, exchanging an amused glance with Michael. Charlotte's tendency to attribute speech and thoughts to Khan had only increased since the incident. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said, playing along. "We should keep it somewhere safe." Charlotte nodded seriously. "Khan says we should put it by the back door. He'll watch it for us." As if to confirm this statement, Khan settled himself near the patio door, his posture alert yet relaxed, a guardian at ease but ever vigilant. Later that night, after Charlotte was asleep, Catherine found herself standing in the doorway of her daughter's room, watching as Khan maintained his nightly vigil beside her bed. The Doberman acknowledged her presence with a glance, but didn't move from his position. "You really are something special," she whispered, not caring if it seemed foolish to talk to a dog as if he could understand complex human emotions. "Thank you for choosing us." Khan's tail thumped once against the carpet, that characteristic single beat that seemed to convey more than a wagging frenzy ever could. In the dim light of the night lamp, his eyes held a depth of understanding that Catherine had stopped trying to rationalize or explain away. She left them there, child and guardian, each secure in the presence of the other. As she made her way back downstairs, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, from uncertainty and social pressure to absolute conviction, from a family of 3 seeking a pet to a complete unit of 4 with a bond cemented by love and shared experience. Khan had done more than save Charlotte from physical danger. He had brought them a new understanding of loyalty, of judgment and preconception, of the profound connection possible between species. His presence had expanded their family circle, enriched their lives, and opened their hearts to a deeper appreciation of what it truly meant to protect and cherish those in your care. And in return for his heroism, they had given him what he had sought, through all his years of abandonment and shelter life, a home where he was valued, understood, and loved unconditionally. A place where his strength was appreciated rather than feared, his vigilance respected rather than mistrusted, and his devotion reciprocated in full measure. It was, Catherine thought as she rejoined Michael on the couch, the most perfect exchange imaginable, a balance of giving and receiving that had transformed all their lives for the better. 1 year after Khan had saved Charlotte from the rattlesnake, the Millers hosted a special celebration in their backyard. The event was ostensibly Khan's adoptiversary, but in reality, it was a commemoration of something far more profound. The day a once unwanted dog had proven himself a hero and changed countless lives in the process. "I can't believe how much has happened in just a year," Catherine said to Michael as they watched guests arrive, each bearing gifts not for the hosts but for the Doberman, who now sat regally beside Charlotte, accepting admiration with dignified tolerance. The backyard had been transformed with streamers and balloons. A large banner reading "Khan our hero" hung along the fence, decorated with children's drawings from Charlotte's class. A professional photographer circulated, capturing candid moments for what would become the first official calendar featuring Khan the Wonder Dog. From neighborhood pariah to having his own merchandise line, Michael chuckled, nodding toward the table where samples of the upcoming Khan calendar, plush toys and children's books were displayed. Not bad for a shelter dog. The merchandise had been Linda's idea. 6 months after Khan's story went viral, the director of Desert Paws Rescue had approached them with a proposal, creating a brand around Khan to raise funds and awareness for shelter animals, particularly those from breeds facing discrimination. "People connect with individual stories," Linda had explained. "Khan's journey from unwanted dog to celebrated hero resonates with everyone who hears it. We can use that connection to help other animals find homes." The Millers had agreed immediately, with the stipulation that all proceeds go directly to animal rescue organizations. The Khan Project, as it became known, had already funded the adoption fees for over 30 difficult-to-place dogs from shelters across Arizona. Now Linda moved through the gathering, introducing the newest beneficiaries of the project, a family who had recently adopted a senior Rottweiler and a young couple with their new Pit Bull mix puppy, breeds that once would have intimidated them before Khan's story changed their perspective. "It's like a ripple effect," Catherine observed to Mrs. Rivera, who had arrived early to help with preparations and now sat in a place of honor near the refreshment table. "One moment of courage creating waves of change." "That's how the important things happen," the elderly woman agreed, her eyes following Khan as he performed a gentle inspection of each arriving guest, particularly the children. Not with big declarations, but with simple actions that show the truth. The guest list included neighbors who had once petitioned against Khan's presence, veterinary staff who had treated him after the snake bite, journalists who had covered his story, and families who had adopted dogs because of him. Even Catherine's mother, once the most vocal critic of bringing a Doberman into the family, now wore a t-shirt emblazoned with Khan's silhouette and the words, "Judge character, not appearance." Dr. Patel, the veterinarian who had treated Khan, arrived with his family and a special treat he had prepared specifically for the canine guest of honor, a dog-friendly cake shaped like a bone. "How's his leg?" the vet inquired, watching as Khan moved through the gathering with his characteristic graceful vigilance. "You'd never know he was injured," Michael replied. "He's back to full strength, though he's a little more cautious around the area where we found the snake." "Intelligent adaptation," Dr. Patel nodded approvingly. "He remembers the danger, but doesn't let fear control him. That's a balanced response, exactly what you want in a family guardian." As the celebration continued, Catherine found herself drawn to the quieter edges of the gathering, observing the interactions with a sense of wonder at how much had changed. Khan had become a fixture in their community. The Doberman who walked Charlotte to the bus stop each morning, and waited patiently for her return each afternoon, who attended neighborhood barbecues with stately decorum, who had inspired a local elementary school to create a Be Like Khan kindness program. The transformation extended beyond their immediate circle. The Khan Project had evolved from a simple fundraising idea into a movement advocating for responsible pet ownership and against breed discrimination. Khan's story had been featured in national magazines, documentary specials, and was now being developed into a children's book series, emphasizing themes of courage, loyalty, and looking beyond stereotypes. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Michael asked, finding Catherine alone by the fence, watching as Charlotte proudly led Khan through a demonstration of tricks for an admiring audience. "I was just thinking about that day at the shelter," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "How close we came to walking past his kennel, how many people had already given up on him." Michael nodded, his gaze following hers. 4 different families returned him. "If Charlotte hadn't insisted, it makes you wonder how many other lives might have been different if people had looked deeper, been more patient," Catherine mused. "Not just Khan's life, but ours, Charlotte's. All the people he's touched through his story." "The ripple effect," Michael agreed, echoing her earlier words to Mrs. Rivera. Across the yard, Charlotte was now seated cross-legged on the lawn, Khan positioned protectively beside her as she read aloud from the draft of the first Khan the Wonder Dog book. A circle of children listened with rapt attention, occasionally reaching out to reverently touch Khan's gleaming coat. "What gets me," Catherine said softly, "is that he didn't do anything extraordinary. Not from his perspective. He was just being true to his nature, protecting someone he loved. He didn't weigh the consequences or consider the danger to himself. That's the purest kind of heroism," Michael observed, acting out of love without calculation. Linda approached them, her face alight with excitement. "You two should see this," she said, holding out her tablet. "The Khan Project website just crashed from too much traffic. We launched the virtual adoption fair an hour ago, where people can sponsor adoption fees for shelter dogs, and the response has been overwhelming." Catherine scrolled through the statistics, her eyes widening. "Over 100 sponsorships already? That's incredible." "It's Khan," Linda said simply. "His story resonates because it's about second chances and seeing beyond appearances. Those are universal themes that touch people deeply." As the afternoon progressed, the celebration evolved into an impromptu community gathering. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now chatted amicably. Children who had previously feared large dogs now confidently offered treats to Khan under Charlotte's careful supervision. Even Diane, who had been the most vocal opponent of Khan's presence in the neighborhood, now volunteered regularly at Desert Paws and had recently adopted an elderly German shepherd herself. "We should make this an annual tradition," Michael suggested, as they began serving the human and canine refreshments. "Not just for Khan, but for what he represents." Catherine agreed, watching as Charlotte guided Khan through the gathering, the dog moving with the calm assurance of one who knew exactly where he belonged. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing how completely he had integrated into their lives, how the space he filled had been empty in ways they hadn't even recognized before his arrival. As evening approached and the celebration began winding down, a reporter from a local news station who had been covering the event approached Catherine. "I'd love to get one final comment," she said, gesturing to her cameraman. "What would you say is the most important lesson from Khan's story?" Catherine considered the question, watching as Khan lay contentedly beside Charlotte, who was showing a younger child the proper way to pet him. The Doberman's eyes, though heavy with contentment, still maintained that watchful awareness that was so characteristically his. "I think it's about looking beyond the surface," she said finally. "Whether it's a dog breed with a bad reputation or a person who doesn't fit our expectations, there's almost always more to the story." Khan had been rejected multiple times because people couldn't see past his appearance or their preconceptions about Dobermans. But Charlotte saw something in him immediately, a connection that transcended those superficial judgments. She paused, gathering her thoughts. "And I think there's also a lesson about trust. We trusted our daughter's instincts, and Khan trusted us enough to give him a real home. That mutual trust created the foundation for everything that followed." After the interview, as the last guests began to leave, the family gathered on the patio. The evening air had cooled to a pleasant temperature, and the setting sun cast a golden light across the yard. Khan lay at Charlotte's feet, his head resting on his paws, but his ears still alert to every sound. "I knew he was special," Charlotte declared, her hand resting on Khan's broad head. "From the very first day I knew." "You certainly did," Michael agreed, ruffling her hair affectionately. "You saw what the rest of us took longer to recognize." Catherine watched them together, her family now complete in a way she hadn't imagined possible before Khan's arrival. The Doberman had brought more than protection to their home. He had brought a deeper understanding of loyalty, courage, and the power of looking beyond appearances. As twilight descended, Catherine found herself reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the initial doubts and community resistance to complete acceptance and celebration. From seeing Khan as just a pet to recognizing him as an integral member of their family with a profound purpose, a guardian whose presence had not only saved Charlotte's life in a moment of crisis, but had enriched all their lives immeasurably every day since. The Khan project would continue to grow, helping more animals find loving homes. The story of the Doberman who went from unwanted shelter dog to celebrated hero would inspire countless people to look beyond stereotypes and preconceptions. But for the Miller family, the greatest legacy was much simpler and more personal. The daily gift of Khan's steadfast presence, his dignified devotion, and the complete certainty that he had always been meant to find them, just as they had been meant to find him. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Charlotte yawned and leaned against her father's shoulder. "Khan says he's had the best day ever," she murmured sleepily. "Tell Khan we feel the same way," Catherine responded, exchanging a smile with Michael over their daughter's head. Khan's tail thumped once against the patio stones, that characteristic single beat that said more than any human words could express. In the gathering darkness, his eyes met Catherine's with that familiar depth of understanding that still occasionally took her breath away. 1 year ago, they had opened their home to a dog in need of a family. In return, he had given them protection, loyalty, and a profound lesson in looking beyond appearances to see the true character beneath. It was, Catherine reflected, the most perfect exchange imaginable, a balance of giving and receiving that had transformed not just their lives, but countless others through the ripples of Khan's extraordinary story. The wonder dog had found his forever home, and they had found in him something they hadn't even known they were missing. A guardian whose courage had saved a life, but whose presence had saved something even more precious, their sense of what it truly meant to be a family. Fin de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Khan and the Miller family's journey has touched your hearts. To continue experiencing emotional stories like this one, we've created a special playlist with equally captivating narratives. You'll find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the special bonds between humans and animals. Join us in the comment section. We'd love to hear about the special animals in your lives who have shown extraordinary loyalty and courage when it mattered most.